Burma announced a long-expected amnesty program for prisoners, but its terms are limited and its scope is unclear. Reports said that Burmese President Thein Sein signed a general amnesty order on humanitarian grounds, commuting death sentences to life imprisonment and cutting 1 year from convicts' prison terms. The announcement was not clear on how many prisoners are covered by the order or if any of the country's more than 2,000 political prisoners will be set free. Yan Win, a spokesman for Democracy leader Aung San Suu Kyi's political group, said the order was unlikely to benefit political prisoners because most are serving long prison sentences. He said this amnesty order is not intended for the political prisoners. Previous mass releases have usually included a handful of political detainees. U.S. State Department spokesman Mark Toner said the amnesty appears to be conditions-based, stressing that the U.S. call to Burma was for all political prisoners be released immediately. The Burmese government generally grants amnesties to mark important national days, but most recipients are usually petty criminals. An amnesty had been expected when the country held its first elections in 20 years in November, when Parliament convened in January and when the nominal civilian government was sworn in at the end of March.
As higher education becomes global, the university rankings are more and more popular. But this trend should be applied and weighted carefully as it still has limits, UNESCO Director General Irina Bokova said in its headquarters. As higher education boomed globally, both in quantity and quality, the two-day annual forum is scheduled to discuss unsolved questions in comparing different institutions and putting them in order, which has become a trendy method to encourage universities to pursue high-quality education. However, on the issue of rankings and accountability, Bokova said in her opening speech that the questions abound are uses and misuses. Listing problems on the drivers behind the proliferation on the rankings, the impact and scientificity of rankings, and the merited goals of this method, Bokova said comparisons between universities sometimes focus more on quantitative rather than qualitative aspects of education, and called quality higher education with balanced research, teaching, and community service. In addition, the ranking based on the quality of disciplines of various universities gets more and more popular currently. These disciplines include science, engineering, medicine, and social sciences, says Liu Nankai, director of the Center for the World-Class Universities, Shanghai Jiangdong University. According to UNESCO, university rankings were first used as information tool to satisfy public demand for transparency, and as time went on, international university rankings are widely regarded as lists of quality, evoking intense competition between establishments. For students under the increasing employment pressure, lots of them have begun to treat employment potentiality in the future as one significant standard to choose universities. And because of high mobility of students under globalization, employment potentiality to some extent has been also accentuated. The forum gathered hundreds of participants from all over the world, including Kientang Assistant UNESCO Director General for Education, Jamil Sami, the World Bank's Tertiary Education Coordinator, and Barbara Estinger, the OECD's Director for Education, along with the leaders for the international rankings community and education stakeholders.
More than 99% of Android phones are potentially leaking data that, if stolen, could be used to get the information they store online. The data being leaked is typically used to get a web-based services such as Google Calendar. The discovery was made by German security researchers looking at how Android phones handle identification information. Google has yet to comment on the loophole uncovered by the researchers. University of ULM researchers made that discovery while watching how Android phones handle login credentials for web-based services. Many applications installed on Android phones interact with Google services by asking for an authentication token, essentially a digital ID card for that app. Once issued, the token removes the need to keep logging into a service for a given length of time. Sometimes, for the researchers, these tokens are sent in plain text over wireless networks. This makes the tokens easy to spot, so criminals eavesdropping on the Wi-Fi traffic would be able to find and steal them, suggest the researchers. Armed with the token, criminals would be able to pose as a particular users and get at their personal information. Even worse, for the researchers, tokens are not bound to particular phones or time of use, so they can be used to impersonate a handset almost anywhere. Abuse of the loophole might mean some people lose data, but other changes may be harder to spot. There is no suggestion that attackers are exploiting the Android loophole at the moment. Almost all versions of the Android operating system were passing around unencrypted authentication tokens for the researchers. It was fixed in version 2.3.4, but suggests Google figures only 0.3% of Android phones are running this software. Some Google services, such as image sharing site Picasa, are still using unencrypted authentication tokens that can be stolen for the team. The researchers urged Android phone owners to update their device to avoid falling victim to attacks via the loophole. Google is also known to be working with operators and handset makers to get updates to people faster than at present.